were pained, we were subjected to misery because God is punishing us for not observing the covenant. That was one theological response. Another theological response was simply, again, we don't know God's ways. We know they are right, says Moses Maimonides, for example, but we don't know exactly how God works, and therefore we must accept His will and ultimately hope for the best. Perhaps that is an explanation we could apply to the Holocaust as well. But clearly, in our most modern era, the Holocaust raised the question again of God's presence or absence in a time of mass Jewish slaughter. How can one be a religious Jew after the Holocaust is really the question. How can one believe in God after the Holocaust? How can one believe in God in its traditional form? How can God really be understood as someone who brought about mass destruction? If God is omniscient, omnipotent, if God can do everything, how can there be such evil and tragedy? Perhaps God burned with his victims at Auschwitz. Perhaps there is no God. So that is really a question that we're going to have to deal with today in this lecture in the context of the thinkers that I have outlined. But there are other questions that we should also add to this one question about God's absence as a result of the Holocaust. There is also not only a question about faith in God, there is also a question about faith in humankind, in man. What about the future of human interaction? What about the future of human dialogue? If we can't trust God after the Holocaust, can we trust man? Isn't it possible that that any civilized country is capable of the mass killing that we experienced in Germany and in Eastern Europe? The most civilized of nations, the nation with great culture and philosophy and art and music, was capable of destroying Jews. It wasn't simply a question of a lack of education. The Nazis had all the education in the world. It had to do with their own moral attitude. How could they be driven? Whatever explanation you come up with in explaining the Nazi Holocaust, can we understand how human beings do such a thing? And if indeed we can no longer believe in God, how can we ever trust again humankind? How can we ever trust again the fact that this could not happen again? And there are specific Jewish implications in this. To really understand the impact of the Holocaust on Jewish consciousness is not only to describe its thinking, its articulate spokesmen who put down their words in writing. It is also to describe a whole generation and its own consciousness. A lack of trust. Clearly, to understand the psychology of the victim of the Holocaust, the one who ultimately overcomes, is to understand how complicated his feelings are towards human culture, towards human interaction, towards even passing on this information to his or her own children. What are the implications of the Holocaust in understanding the rise of the State of Israel and its continual problem of security and its struggle for survival?